Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Kathryn Anthonisen. I'm the Vice President, External Relations at CANARIE. Welcome to today's webinar, Cybersecurity Initiatives Program, National Alignment for Local Impact. Bonjour à tous et bienvenue. Je suis Kathryn Anthonisen. Je suis le vice-présidente Relations extérieures à CANARIE. Bienvenue de notre webinaire aujourd'hui. Je vais présenter en anglais aujourd'hui, mais nous avons un service de traduction dont pour nos collègues francophones, il y a un bouton au-dessus de votre écran Interpretation et vous pouvez utiliser le service de traduction so that all of our guests this afternoon can listen to the presentation in the language of your choice. So welcome, let's begin. I do want to add, for those of you listening in French or those of you listening in English, we will send along the presentation deck in both French and English to all participants today, so you don't need to worry about taking be recording today's presentation. So it will be recorded and archived, so any audio will be recorded. However, any questions that you type in will not be part of the recording. I am joined today by two colleagues who are participating with us, who are partners in the Cybersecurity Initiatives Program, Mark Gaudet from CIRA and Jill Kowalchuk from CanSSOC. We'll be hearing from them a little later on in the presentation. But I think if we're all ready, welcome and let's begin. This is just a very high-level overview of today's presentation. I do hope that my presentation overview will take about 20 minutes. Mark and Jill will talk about the specifics of the funded initiatives for about 20 minutes, and then I hope we have about 20 minutes at the end of the hour for a robust question and answer. So I will do my best to stick to that schedule. Excuse me, next slide, please. So I don't think I need to tell any of you on this call about the urgency of cybersecurity in research and education. You've seen these headlines, you've read about the SolarWinds breach of the US government infrastructure that we're still learning about. Suffice it to say, this is a threat that is at the top of our priority list. But for those of us, next slide please, Christina, in research and education, the problem becomes more complex given the web of connections that we have. So research and education organizations across Canada were connected physically through the research and education network, your connections to that infrastructure, but there's also a web of other collaborations. There's, the CIOs in Cuccio, there's the Vice President's research or Vice President's Finance and Administration through Cabo, there's research engagements, there are regional engagements, there's work with your NREN partner in the province, there are all kinds of collaborations that are going on, and the web of those, and that web makes for a tremendously strong sector and ecosystem, but it also highlights that given the interconnectedness of this sector, we are only as strong as the weakest link. And when we look at cybersecurity and the complexity of Canada's higher ed ecosystem, and when I talk about that, I mean CEGEPs, polytechnics, colleges, and universities. So you have that heterogeneity of the sector and layer on the tremendous complexity of cybersecurity, collaboration, alignment, and coordination really are absolutely essential if we're going to tackle this problem. So in our view, when it comes to securing the whole sector, we need to secure every member of the sector in a way that is aligned and coordinated and effective. And when I talk about the sector in Canada, next slide, please, Christina. This is just a screen grab of a map that we're working on, an interactive map to show all the connections to the Canada's National Research and Education Network, but the global National Research and Education Network. So here's just a snapshot of Canada. Almost 800 institutions connected to our National Research and Education Network, of which there are almost 200 from coast to coast to coast, north and south, that we are encouraging to collaborate to secure the entire sector. And the vision that we have, that has been built by the community for this program is quite simple. It's a more secure Canada. It's bold, it's simple. We believe it's achievable if, next slide please, we are able to coordinate on a national level to drive local impact. So CANARIE has worked with partners across the community to leverage that collaborative ethos and to develop a program that recognizes the cybersecurity threats at several layers. So you have laptops and phones and tablets, you have organizational networks, you have NREN and digital research infrastructure, and then you have the entire sector. So the program, as we came together with colleagues in the sector, we want to make sure we build on an existing initiatives because we know there's tremendous work that's already been done. Work with your NREN partners. I'm thinking about OnCheck in Ontario. Work with associations when we think about the BitSite benchmarking project by Cuccio. There are initiatives at institutions across the country. We do not want to impede those at all. We want to build on them, coordinate, and strengthen those initiatives, engage the community to govern and evolve the program for the benefit of the community. So the opportunity then is to participate in this program, to work to augment the cybersecurity readiness at your institution, and by doing that, join in a national cohort of cybersecurity experts working to build and evolve the cybersecurity posture of the sector as a whole. Again, the lodestar for us is this program is built by the community, for the community, and it will evolve according to the needs and priorities of the community. Next slide. And when I talk about the community, here's kind of a view of who we have been working with. Our NREN partners, of course, across the country, but also associations representing stakeholders in the sector. So that's kind of a bit of a context setting for you. Now I'd like to get into the specific details of what is the Cybersecurity Initiatives Program. Well, it is a result of CANARIE being given a mandate in our current mandate years 2020 to 2024, given an enhanced cybersecurity mandate and funding to invest in priority initiatives to strengthen the cybersecurity posture of the sector. So we fund initiatives that are enabled at organizations with our partners, but we administer, coordinate, and try and align the program, but what gets funded and what the priorities are, this is all driven through a governance structure that is focused, that is completely focused on the needs of the sector. And I'd like to take just a few moments to talk to you about the governance structure that has been put together, because it really is central to how the program operates and how it will evolve, and how you can have ensure your voice is heard in the evolution of the Cybersecurity Initiatives Program. So next slide, please, Christina. The Cybersecurity Advisory Committee is the executive committee that is governing this program. And the role of this committee is twofold. Firstly, members of this committee are working to advocate for a national approach and alignment for cybersecurity. And then they are also providing us with guidance and recommendations on funding for new initiatives. And members of this committee span the sector that we are serving, CEGEPs, polytechnics, colleges, and universities. We have chief information officers and CISOs. We have vice presidents, finance administration. We have private sector representatives. We have not-for-profit representatives. It's a broad spectrum of senior leaders in cybersecurity who are helping us, who are shaping the program. But you'll recognize that cybersecurity for a sector as heterogeneous as Canada's research and education sector, attacking a challenge as complex as cybersecurity, you need a whole lot of context and information to kind of wade through and make strategic decisions. So as part of the governance structure, the Cybersecurity Advisory Committee has 3 standing committees that provide that context and additional information that allow them to make strategic decisions. And I'll just briefly describe those 3 standing committees. The first one is the Cybersecurity Technical Committee. Their role is to develop over the long term a proposed reference architecture for cybersecurity for Canada's research and education communities. Now that's a longer term project they will work on. They will also provide guidance and advice on the technical aspects of various initiatives that are under consideration, but really help to come to an alignment on what an appropriate reference architecture for cybersecurity in higher ed could be. So there's a technical committee. There's also a trust and identity standing committee. And as you likely know, digital identities are key in our lives today, and they're also a key portal for bad actors to do their mischief. So the evolution of the digital identity ecosystem is central to the evolution of cybersecurity writ large and has a real impact on the Cybersecurity Initiatives program. So that committee is keeping the Executive Cybersecurity Advisory Committee up to date on where that ecosystem is going, where the technology is going, and how that would impact initiatives in the program. And the third standing committee is the Cybersecurity Initiatives Deployment Committee. And I've said several times, you know, the range of institutions from a small college in Northern Alberta to an urban CEGEP in Montreal to a large comprehensive university in Vancouver. This committee is helping us understand the reality on the ground at these institutions. How does it work on the ground so that CANARIE then is able to design initiatives that can be easily absorbed at the institutions. So these 3 committees, the Cybersecurity Technical Committee, Initiatives Deployment, and Trust and Identity Committee provide additional context and guidance to the Cybersecurity Advisory Committee. So that's a little more detail on that governance structure. But I do want to add one more element. Measurement is key for everyone I know in the community. And there have been some cybersecurity measurement projects undertaken already. The Cuccio BitSite project I mentioned earlier. Another committee of the Cybersecurity Advisory Committee, rather a working group, the Measurement and Metrics Working Group, is working to provide guidance on how we develop a measurement framework that allows us to see the impact of funded initiatives on institutions and on the sector as a whole. So this measurement framework would allow us to see which initiatives have had the most impact and to truly gather the data that allows us at CANARIE to go back to our funders with an argument for additional funding based on data gathered through this program. So we're continuing to work on that. The measurement framework, we're also looking to provide enough nuance in that framework so that individual institutions can compare themselves in terms of cybersecurity readiness to their peers regionally or nationally, and further that they can also determine the impact of initiatives that they've funded at their institution and see how that moves the dial on that their cybersecurity readiness as compared to other institutional peers in their region or nationally. So that's another key element under the guidance of the Cybersecurity Advisory Committee. So that's governance. Now I bet you want to hear about what's in it for you. So next slide, please, Christina. So benefits for eligible organizations, quite simply, you will have an opportunity to strengthen the security posture of your organization. But beyond that, to ensure that your IT and cybersecurity, information security teams are participating with a national cohort of cybersecurity experts from across the sector, increasing their capacity and expertise, collaborating nationally, with a view to strengthening what happens at your institution, which then cascades, if that's happening at all institutions in a region, then they are all strengthened, and then across the regions, all the regions get strengthened, and the rising tide lifts all boats. So we continue to augment the cybersecurity capacity of the sector. So that's the benefit for you. Next slide. It is a benefit that comes at no cost. Next slide. Some of you are thinking, well, free's not free. And you're right, there is no cost, but the engagement of your teams, the involvement of your teams is your investment, and it's investment in strengthening cybersecurity at your institution, but also contributing to a strengthened cybersecurity posture across the sector. Next slide, please. And of course, for the sector, we strengthen the whole sector. We learn from each other and develop a cohort of collaborative experts focused on cybersecurity in R&E. And as a result of that, working towards development of best practices and for securing R&E data, and just developing that strong collaborative cohort of experts that learn from each other and continue to work collaboratively to our common benefit. Next slide, please. So how does it work? Many of you, if you know CANARIE, we're a relatively small organization. We have, this funding and funded initiatives to get out, or almost 200 organizations. We have to rely and collaborate with our partners. And for CANARIE, their closest partners are our NREN partners in the provinces and territories. So, and those NREN partners in the provinces and territories know their member institutions better than anyone. They engage with them. They have those relationships. So we are working with our NREN partners and with our initiative partners, the folks who have developed the services, to implement the funded initiatives at research and education institutions. Institutions then absorb those services, participate in the national collaboration, and then they provide feedback back to CANARIE and to the Cybersecurity Advisory Committee. What works, what doesn't work, what gaps are still out there, this could have been done better, so that there's an iterative process, a strong feedback loop that ensures the services that are being funded and delivered to the institutions are the services that the institutions are in a position to absorb and that address priority cybersecurity needs. Next slide, please. And now we get down to a bit of the nitty-gritty. The first 3 initiatives funded under the program, approved by the Cybersecurity Advisory Committee in June of this year, the CIRA DNS Firewall, the CanSSOC threat feed, and the intrusion detection system. And they were selected because they are intended to work and integrate with each other to, again, this kind of virtuous cycle to continually strengthen and augment the cybersecurity capacity of the institution and in turn, the whole sector. Next slide. I'll go through this. We're going to get more detail from Mark and Jill in a moment, but you'll just see this is a very high level visual. DNS Firewall, in 10 words or less, blocks access to malicious websites. CanSSOC threat feed is a very specific curated feed of threats specific to research and education, so you don't have to wade through things that aren't relevant to you. And the intrusion detection system really focuses on institutional networks and identifying specific behaviors and intrusions. And together, the 3 initiatives, next slide, please. address different areas of cybersecurity, as you can see here, but they all dynamically update the system with new threats as they emerge. So again, it's that continually assessing, continually improving, continually building the wall against threat actors that keep on coming at us. So at this point, I think I will turn it over to Mark Gaudet from CIRA, and he will be able to give you much more detail and context on the DNS firewall. Mark.
Thanks, Kathryn. Yeah, my name's Mark Gaudet, and I'm going to give you a brief overview of the DNS firewall. So just quickly, what is it? What's the value proposition? What value does it bring to its users? And what's the vision in a national higher ed security ecosystem? And I've been involved with the DNS. I've been at CIRA for the past 6 years and have been involved with every aspect of the DNS firewall since we launched it 3 years ago. And CIRA, we're super excited to be part of CANARIE's CIP initiative. So the DNS firewall, what it does is it looks at all of the DNS queries coming out of the network and compares them to multiple threat feeds and determines whether to allow or block them. So the things it can do, since every device and every application uses DNS, it sees every access to the internet. So it can block users from accessing known malicious sites, blocking access to phishing sites, as well as if malware does get into the network, a botnet, for example, then 90% of botnets use DNS for command and control. So at the DNS level, we can see those command and control DNS queries and block them. And by blocking those, disable the activity of a botnet if it does make it into the network. So the DNS is really critical in that it's used ubiquitously across all devices and applications and gives a really good visibility of all activity on the network, be it malicious or legitimate. The service is, we partnered with Akamai for this service. So we're using Akamai software and threat feeds, but CIRA owns and operates the service. So it's the DNS servers are located in CIRA data centers across Canada. All of the data is kept in Canada. So 100% owned and operated by CIRA partnered with Akamai. At this point, there's around 500 organizations using the service with almost 2 million users behind the service. Lots of very high adoption rate in education, municipalities, lots of K-12, representing lots of users. So if you go to the next slide. One of the key values in this service is the threat feed. So Akamai provides the core threat feed that we use for this service. And what they do is they receive anonymized streams of DNS queries from their global ISP customers. So large ISPs like Cox, Comcast, and they have customers in more than 100 ISPs in more than 40 countries. So in their data science, they'll receive more than 1 million DNS queries per second, and they're analyzing those in combination with 37 other public and commercial threat feeds. And within a minute of seeing a domain, newly queried domain, it will be analyzed and added to the threat feed. And we see a huge value in the higher education sector. So universities, colleges, CEGEPs using this service, a high number of blocks, so 5 times our base block rate in other types of networks. Akamai will be adding 100,000 new threats each day. And where they focus a lot of their effort is looking at newly seen domains. So they keep track of every domain that's been queried in the past 60 days globally across their base. And that newly seen domains is where a lot of the threat landscape or a lot of the new threats are identified. Just thinking what else. Yeah, the service is, we built it very resilient. So the Akamai software is carrier grade. We can handle millions of DNS queries per second across Canada. We built it with a lot of redundancy. It's anycasted, so there's multiple sites supporting 2 IP addresses and multiple servers in each location. So high performance, high availability service. And with Akamai seeing 3% of all global DNS queries and 30% of all web traffic, they have access to the data that lets them produce a high value threat feed. And we position this as an incremental layer of protection. So it's not meant to replace a physical firewall, a Palo Alto, or antivirus software. It's augmenting your existing security because it's adding a different threat feed with different timing than those other services. So roughly 25 to 30% of Akamai's threat feed is unique compared to antivirus threat feeds or a physical firewall. So if you go to the next slide, please. So while all of the individual organizations using this service are receiving an incremental layer of protection, the vision is much bigger. So in this slide, you can see at the bottom, just for illustrative purposes, the founding members of CanSSOC are at the bottom, but organizations, universities, colleges, and CJEPs will be sending DNS queries to this service. They'll be being protected, but at the same time, providing in the red a lot of DNS data, so billions of queries per month, as well as a view on the threat landscape for higher ed. What kind of malware exists inside networks or on student devices? What kind of malicious sites are being accessed? What kind of phishing domains are being used against higher ed? So a real rich data set that can feed, and then you can see that feeding upwards into that block DNS data, where much like Akamai produces a threat feed for the service, the higher ed data can be used to analyze and identify new threats, apply AI and machine learning to it, and that can feed back into CanSSOC to assist them in threat hunting and determining new threats. And right now in the DNS firewall, in addition to the Akamai threat feed, we've already integrated with CanSSOC and we're consuming our threat feed. So if CanSSOC identifies something, a threat, and adds it to the threat feed, it will be instantly blocked at the DNS level. So it's a good way for some organizations to easily block things identified by CanSSOC. That's really simple. By implementing DNS firewall, they'll get that level of protection. And then one other aspect to the data is that we're already working with the University of Nebraska, CIC at the University of New Brunswick. So there's a lot of opportunities for cybersecurity research in the DNS data. So we've done a bunch of projects over the past 12 months with DNS data to identify new threats, identify anomalies, look for phishing domains that might match specific organization names, try to predict risky behavior based on DNS query data patterns. So as well as, applying algorithms, testing algorithms against real DNS data to see if they would have picked up, new botnets or algorithmically generated domain names. So you can see that in addition to getting the base level of protection, there's an opportunity to create an ecosystem around the data, the threat landscape data, and consuming other threat feeds produced by CanSSOC. So I think it's a really exciting area, and I think at this point, we're close to 60 CANARIE organizations participating in the program and growing quickly. So it's going to be really well adopted with lots of data and the opportunity to do some really exciting projects with the data and integration with CanSSOC. And that's all I have, Kathryn. So I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks very much, Mark. And now Jill Kowalchuk, Executive Director of CanSSOC. Over to you, Jill.
Thanks, Kathryn. So CanSSOC isn't an independent organization, but instead it's a collaboration between universities and now growing to include colleges and polytechniques with the mission of better than we can do on our own, always in partnership. Well, we started, and Mark mentioned it on the previous slide, with a small number of institutions only as a proof of concept. We've now transitioned, and membership is open to all connected institutions. Being a member in CanSSOC means getting access to the threat feed, as we'll talk about a little bit more today, as well as being a part of the community around sharing intelligence and receiving more information about how to improve your information security portfolios for the community. Ultimately, we are the community working collaboratively to not only identify and understand information security challenges for our sector, but also to work collaboratively on the development and implementations of solutions that are tailored and targeted to our community and our needs. As Kathryn's noted, for the community, by the community, is the same mandate that we have as we move forward. Foundationally, the members of CanSSOC organization are institutions. However, we're just one piece of this puzzle. The information security ecosystem, as Kathryn has noted, includes many organizations, and CanSSOC is working hand in hand with these organizations, as well as with the institutions, to bring together these pieces to provide services, intelligence, and support that's both tailored and targeted to the post-secondary community. Next slide. So we're using the NIST framework. NIST outlines 5 key areas: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Provides a great foundation for alignment on conversations in the information security space. If you were to come and ask CanSSOC where our focus is better than we can do on our own, as we've talked about before, but focusing on those areas of detection and response. We're working with other partners and organizations in the space like CIRA and the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, CANARIE, and others on operational coordination. So looking at the different services and solutions that are out there and how we can pull them together to have them more effectively work together. We really want to leverage existing investments and initiatives inside the detection and response space to make things better for institutions. We're looking to bring together pieces to enable better technology, processes, and personnel to fill gaps and enhance the services for more efficient and effective detection and response. If we were to look more specifically at threat feed, the first CanSSOC initiative being launched as part of the CANARIE cybersecurity program, while it fits into many of the NIST areas, the value of launching this solution first is it allows us to provide some basic detection and response solutions to a wide range of institutions who might not have the same resources in the information security space. We've deployed or developed this solution with the express intent to benefit from advanced detection and response we're seeing at some of the other institutions who have more resources, but allowing any and every institution out there who have limited resources to effectively and efficiently take advantage of this with little to no effort on their end. So the goal of CanSSOC is to provide advanced detection and response. What we mean by advanced detection and response is leveraging the solutions that institutions might already have inside technologies and security operations center on campus, as well as looking what a number of the NREN partners have deployed around the Shared SIM project and others, where they're collecting data and logs. What we're looking to do is leverage these existing investments and solutions to provide advanced detection and response across multiple institutions and across Canada. If you're in this space, you know that detection and response and sending and collecting and analyzing information is difficult. And it can be challenging to get information and share information. Threat feed is a simple way for us to take intelligence that we're receiving from a smaller number of institutions or from other sources and share it out in an automated fashion that's both curated and targeted to the higher education sector. We'll go to the next slide and I'll talk a little bit more about the threat feed initiative in more detail. So what you see on this slide describes in a little bit more detail what the threat feed solution is. On the left, you see that we're taking threat intelligence from a number of sources. First is the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. So for those institutions who have already subscribed to the Avantel service, or when you looked at Mark's slide and he had it as one of the threat feed sources, We work closely with the Cyber Center to develop an agreement where we can take that intelligence and reshare it out as combined with other intelligence to allow institutions to receive the maximum amount of information in the easiest way possible. We've also acquired a commercial solution that we provide. And we take we look on Twitter and different sources for intelligence that's targeted to our feed and manually add it into our threat feed. We also have started our advanced detection response and analysis solution. And so we take intelligence that we're seeing across our institutions and put that into our threat feed platform. As we move forward, we're looking to curate and add additional threat intelligence sources. For some of these institutions that have a wide range of resources, we're working on providing this information out in a variety of formats to allow institutions to take advantage of it. What you see on the right is a set of different ways in which you can take threat intelligence or the intelligence from our threat feed and use it at your institution. You can also look at what you see on the right as a bit of a spectrum. So at the bottom where you see CIRA DNS Firewall, to be able to use threat feed in your CNS firewall, that is the easiest way to do it. It's seamless, and as we'll talk about, it really involves the click of a button. Moving all the way up to the top of the stack, where you have institutions that have their own threat intel platform, you can take our threat intelligence and leverage it with the curation and additional intelligence you have inside your institution. So for institutions that have a lot of resources, they might have information security resources, they might have a person or people on campus that take different open source intelligence as well as potentially paid commercial intelligence and provide it inside their platform. What we'll do is take a set of that intelligence and make it so that work is already done for you. We're also eager to collaborate with those institutions so that as we expand what threat intelligence sources we have, we're leveraging the expertise and experience from those institutions that spend a lot of time. Going back to those who have limited resources, when you sign up to the CIRA DNS Firewall, if you're an eligible institution signing up through this program, one of the options you'll see when you're configuring your firewall is which threat feeds would you like to take advantage of. Mark talked about Akamai in his presentation. The CanSSOC threat feed will be one of those sources as well. And you can check the button and automatically use CanSSOC's threat feed to block in your firewall. No additional agreements other than the agreement you need to sign with CANARIE needs to be implemented. In addition to that, if you also have a firewall on campus, as Mark talked about, the DNS firewall is intended to be just one level of protection. If you have a next-gen firewall and you'd like to take the CanSSOC threat feed, configure it inside your next-gen firewall and block directly off of it, which we encourage institutions to do. In addition to signing up with CANARIE through your NREN partner, you would sign a basic non-disclosure agreement with us. And at that point in time, we would provide you instructions on how to configure your firewall to block using our threat feed. This would take you approximately 2 to 3 hours of a technical members team on campus. And then you'd be able to block in an automated fashion all of the malicious activity that has been identified in the threat feed. You can also integrate it into a variety of other services that you might see on campus. And we can talk a little bit more about this in detail in tomorrow's webinar, or also answer questions that you may have later in today's session. Thanks, Kathryn.
All right, thank you, Jill. Next slide, please, Christina. I'll just give you a quick overview of the intrusion detection system, the third funded initiative we're presenting to you today. Next slide, please, Christina. Some of you may already be participating in this because intrusion detection system is the evolution of the Joint Security Project, which was launched in 2018 originally. Expanded to include 137 participating organizations. And we're hoping to encourage the remaining 70 eligible organizations to join this initiative. So next slide, please, Christina. The intrusion detection system really is two things. It's an appliance that is inserted on your institutional network that is able to identify threats and intrusions. So you get the ongoing data stream from that appliance, but we also provide In addition to the server and the software installation, we provide funding so that a member of your team is able to install, configure, maintain the hardware, but then also participate in the community of IDS practitioners, monthly calls. I think that the last in-person event actually that CANARIE hosted last year around this time was workshops for participants in the intrusion detection system. So they get the data from the appliance, that it goes to a data aggregating platform, and what those platforms do, and not through anonymizing the data, look at overall trends and issues that they see across participating institutions, and then they are able to provide data back to those institutions and prompt whatever mitigation strategies they may wish to implement. So next slide, please, Christina. So again, the objectives of this initiative in the program, again, generate accurate, actionable, timely data for those institutions, ensure that they can keep a close eye on security posture, on new threats, perform risk assessments, and also more broadly track the evolution of what kind of threat data is coming in, and develop some benchmarks for security practices. So next slide, please, Christina. So we've gone through kind of the context for the program, development of the program, governance, initial initiatives and what they mean to you. Now a few last slides on how you can participate. Your provincial or territorial NREN partner would have been in touch with you likely by now to let you know that you are an eligible organization in the program. Then we ask you to complete a short participation form and sign an agreement with CANARIE. It's a standard, very lightweight agreement, because we want as little friction as possible in terms of enabling organizations to participate in this program. So it's a very lightweight agreement that says, yes, you want to participate in the program. And once that agreement is executed, then you work with your NREN partner to enable implementation of these initiatives. You only need to sign that agreement with CANARIE the one time, and then any other funded initiatives that are approved by that are recommended by the Cybersecurity Advisory Committee and approved by the CANARIE board, you are then eligible to participate and absorb those initiatives. Next slide, please. And lastly, there is no deadline other than the deadline of CANARIE's current mandate, where funding for this program expires on March 31st, 2024. We do encourage you, you can sign the OCCA at any time, but the sooner that you have that agreement executed, the sooner you can start to engage in the funded initiatives and participate in this great national challenge to better secure Canada's research and education organizations. So I believe that is it. We have, oh, I was over by 5, but we do have 15 minutes and encourage questions from any of our guests this afternoon. I am not seeing any questions coming up. I'll give it a couple more moments, but I do want to make you aware, for those of you who may want members of your team to understand more of the implementation and technical dimensions of the initiatives that we introduced today, we do have another webinar more focused on implementation scheduled for tomorrow, same time, 1 p.m. ET. Oh, we do have one question. All right, we have a question. I completed an application last week. How long before the OCCA gets sent to us? Ben, I'm afraid I can't answer that question. Any of my colleagues from program operations may be able to weigh in, but I would imagine, Ben, within if you completed it a week ago, within 10 to 14 days, you should receive at least some information from your NREN partner. All right, we have a question from Raphael. Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned Cuccio BitSite project. Could you provide some details around this initiative? I'm afraid I cannot provide details. What I do know, if you are a Cuccio member, Laurie McMullen is the executive director, and last I knew, Brian Lesser, CIO at Ryerson, was in charge of that project, but I would go through Laurie at Cuccio first to find out more. All right, if there are no, further, thank you, Adam. Interesting question. Our legal department is asking some language questions, assume about the OCCA. How much room is there for changes in any of the agreements, or should we really push them to just sign it? We collaborated with colleagues from institutions in developing that agreement, Adam, and we made it as lightweight as possible. I would not say that we would want to change any of the language in the agreement because it is made to be signed by 190 odd institutions across the country. However, if you do have specific questions about language, I do encourage you to contact laura.lamar@canarie.ca. She's our program operations manager, and she'll be able to provide more detail for you. Oh, and a question from Sharif. When will the recording from this webinar be available? I will ask Christina.
The recording should be available later on this week.
All right. And circling back to Ben's question about his agreement, you should have it in the next day or two. All right, countdown for last questions. Okay, another question from Raphael. To evaluate the impact of cybersecurity, of a cybersecurity initiative, and determine which one has the most impact, which metrics will be used? Great question, Raphael. I do not, that is a question for the measurement and metrics working group. They are the ones who are going to provide guidance on what that measurement framework will look like. Question from Keith, just to verify, when is the final report due for the JSP? I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that question either. Anyone on the line, if any CANARIE colleagues can help answer Keith's question. All right, I'll just leave a few more moments if anyone else wants to add a question to the chat. All right, no more questions coming through. I do want to thank all of you for your time and attention here this afternoon. Again, there is a more detailed webinar on implementation of the initiatives tomorrow, and more information on the cybersecurity program at the CANARIE website noted there. In the interim, if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to anyone at CANARIE. If we can't answer your questions, we will absolutely direct you to someone who can. We look forward to rich and robust and fruitful collaborations on cybersecurity as we move forward into 2021. I thank you all for your time and attention this afternoon.